The World Anti-Doping Agency has rejected criticism of its decision to not ban 23 Chinese swimmers who tested positive to a banned substance ahead of the 2021 Tokyo Olympics. Now, it was revealed that the athletes tested positive to a drug known as TMZ, which is commonly used to treat heart disease, and it is considered to be performance enhancing. The US Doping Agency believed the swimmers tested positive as a result of a contaminated hotel kitchen. The World Anti-Doping Agency stated in an online press conference that the ban would not have been fair on the athletes.
WADA followed all due process and diligently investigated every lead and line of inquiry in this matter. If we had to do it over again now, we would do exactly the same thing.
Chinese anti-doping agency investigated the incident in 2021 and handed their findings to WADA, who later reviewed and endorsed the findings. German documentary maker Hajo Seppelt, who covered the story, said the matter has not been professionally dealt with.
It's not the task of WADA to charge athletes. This has been the task of the Chinese anti-doping agency. WADA's task was to appeal, if they wanted to appeal, against the decision made by the Chinese anti-doping agency called CINADA. The whole circumstances are very, very strange and weird, and that's beginning with alleged contamination in the hotel kitchen. It's contamination allegedly with trimetazidine or TMZ, which is a heart medication. And the question has to be raised, why in a kitchen in a hotel where athletes have been staying late 2020, early 21, why heart medication finds its way in a hotel kitchen, there in the cooking pot, from a cooking pot to a table on the plates of the athletes and then their stomachs. This sounds really, really strange, and nobody would believe that, but WADA has believed it.
Let's get more on this. Dr. Catherine Ordway is an expert in sports integrity, ethics and law at the University of Canberra, and she joins us now. Dr. Ordway, thank you for joining us. We had this overnight press conference to address this after the story came to light. This was from WADA. They gave a more detailed timeline, but has that news conference in any way given athletes more trust of fair competition or of WADA itself?
Yes, I would hope so. A number of the questions were answered and put to them by the journalists from around the world. So they had a full and frank opportunity to ask any questions. I guess the overriding question is, why didn't the World Anti-Doping Agency, together with the Chinese authorities for anti-doping, come out about this in 2021? That would have solved all of this allegations around cover-up and suggestions about lack of trust and so on. And if they'd done that first up, I think that the presser last night really helped, but there's still a number of really serious questions to be answered.
Yeah, there shows, and you've made that point there. There is the substance and any questions surrounding that, and that is a major issue, but it's also the secrecy, the fact that it wasn't disclosed at the time. Did they give any explanation as to why?
Their explanation is that under the WADA code, if there's a determination that environmental contamination has taken place, then there's no anti-doping rule violation to publicly disclose. Now, that seems to be a little disingenuous, given you're talking about 23 of the most elite athletes in the world. But it doesn't matter which country they come from. I think that if there was a mass contamination like that for any team, that the World Anti-Doping Agency, together with the responsible agency, which in this case was CINADA, the Chinese Anti-Doping Authority, should have come together and had an open press conference, because integrity relies on transparency. And if you've got any kind of investigations happening in the background and a suggestion of cover-up, then that's when people really lose trust in the system.
Did we learn any more about, or anything really, about how that substance would have gotten into the team kitchen in the spice jars as suggested, and then therefore the athletes?
Not really. And I think that's what's concerning people, is that given Of course, there was the COVID scenario, so people weren't able to move freely and do investigations in the normal way. But the Chinese police were involved. There's suggestions that the Chinese state authorities were involved, the health authorities, of course. You can't have contamination in kitchens that involve any clientele. Don't worry about elite athletes. And the fact that they were all doing their investigations kind of 2 months down the track was a real concern, because how are they finding things in the drain and in the exhaust system and so on down the track, and not have any leads on where did this heart medication come from?
Do you think a loophole has been exposed here?
I guess the first one is because the World Anti-Doping Agency is doing a review of the World Anti-Doping Code right now. It's a consultation process, and the obvious one would be to allow for public disclosure in cases where they determine that no investigation is warranted. Now, that's perfectly reasonable in some cases where they can establish contamination. This case, it's not quite establishing contamination, it's almost the opposite. It's not able to disprove a contamination theory. So in that setting, I think the World Anti-Doping Agency should have the authority to come out and tell the world, so that there aren't these questions hanging over the athletes. Because imagine trying to prepare for an Olympic Games less than 100 days out and having the whole world asking questions about whether you're a doping athlete or not.
Well, further to that, how do you think that this will affect not only what did happen at the Tokyo Olympics, but at the lead up to the Paris Olympics this year? How will this hang over that?
I think it will. And of course, some of the athletes that will be competing in Paris for China won't have been the same athletes that were involved in 2021, and yet they'll still be kind of tarred with the same brush. And I do feel for them. It's a big event. That the Olympic Games only comes around every 4 years. I mean, obviously with COVID, it's 3 years this time round. But it is a big event, and perhaps the only time some of those athletes will get to an Olympic Games. And if they are innocent and they've worked hard to get to where they are, to have this hanging over their heads is really disappointing and must be very stressful for them.